This training is developed by the Utah State Office of Education and is required of all employees of public schools. Utah's compulsory education law requires parents enroll their children in school. As caregivers of these children, LEAs have a legal and ethical obligation to create safe and healthy learning environments. The purpose of this training is to provide staff members with information to protect themselves and students from the consequences of failing to maintain appropriate boundaries between themselves and the students. This training addresses a wide range of behaviors and interactions between staff and students, from obviously unlawful or unethical interactions to less obvious boundary blurring behaviors that undermine the professional staff-student relationship and can lead to misconduct or create the appearance of impropriety. School staff members are expected to provide students with appropriate guidance, direction, understanding, and support in a professional manner while acting within accepted standards of conduct. Establishing and maintaining appropriate personal boundaries for staff-student relationships are key to successfully achieving this. Whether driving a bus, interacting in a classroom, passing in the hallway, assisting at an extracurricular activity, or serving meals in the cafeteria, appropriate personal boundaries between staff members and students must be maintained. Clearly identifying risky behaviors that may lead to inappropriate relationships is the first step in protecting students and staff. Every staff member must establish strong boundaries, stay within those boundaries, and intervene and report when observing others crossing boundaries. The negative consequence of a staff member violating the boundaries of the staff-student relationship are far-reaching. A student's perspective of appropriate staff-student relationships and trust in adults is compromised. Parent and community trust in school, staff, and the educational system as a whole is damaged. Coworkers are impacted by the negative publicity and discord resulting from a peer's inappropriate conduct. Liability for the resulting harm to a student may be placed on the organization and the staff member responsible for the misconduct. And last, the staff member may face disciplinary action or termination from employment, licensure action if a licensed educator, and criminal charges depending on the nature of the violation. Utah State Board of Education Administration rules mandates every LEA, which means every school district or charter school, establish a code of conduct applicable to all staff members working in public schools in Utah. The term staff member includes professional staff, support staff, part-time, full-time, permanent, temporary, provisional contract, who spend substantial unsupervised time alone with children. The Code of Conduct in the state of Utah requires every staff member to avoid boundary violations with students. Never subject a student to abuse, physical, mental, emotional, or sexual. Communicate with students in a professional manner, regardless of when, where, or how it takes place. Electronic communication and the use of social media must follow LEA policy and be used for educationally related purposes. Never touch a student in a way that makes a reasonably objective student feel uncomfortable. Never discriminate against a student based on race, religion, gender, disability, national origin, gender identity, sexual orientation, or other protected class of characteristics. Never use or be under the influence of alcohol or illegal substances during work hours, at school activity, or on school property. Never use tobacco products on school property or at a school activity. Finally, all staff members have a legal obligation under state statute and administrative rule and the LEA Code of Conduct policy to report suspected violations of this policy or suspected abuse or neglect. An LEA's local code of conduct may include stricter or more detailed requirements, but must include the provisions outlined in this presentation. Each of us as individuals sees the world around us in our own unique way. We interpret the events around us, the acts of others, and even our own actions in light of our individual set of experiences. For example, one teacher accused of inappropriately touching students responded, "I didn't do anything wrong. I come from a really touchy-feely family. That's just how I am." A coworker offended by, and concerned with the teacher's actions, reported the employee's conduct to an administrator. The coworker had obviously developed a very different standard of appropriate personal space between a staff member and a student. From his perspective, hands-off entirely should be the rule. So which interpretation of appropriate should we rely on? How do we define where to draw the line? Some actions are clearly identified in law, rules, and policies. However, where a specific action is not clearly identified, appropriate boundaries for personal interactions between staff and students must be based on common, acceptable, safe, healthy, and productive standards. Personal standards of what is acceptable, such as touchy-feely, must be set aside. In determining whether a person acted appropriately in a given situation, courts have adopted the reasonably prudent person state standard. How would a reasonable individual acting with care, wisdom, and concern for the future have behaved if he were in the same position, faced with the same set of circumstances? Applied to this code of conduct, what would a reasonably prudent education employee or staff member in the same circumstance view as acceptable?